Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Build at Home. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri from my home, and I'm talking to David Rees from his home, the great cartoonist, comedian, amazing David Rees, host of Election Profit Makers podcast. David, good to see you. How are you?
Uh,
I know. I should come up with a different question.
is it like a scale of 1 to 10 face masks? I guess I'm at like a 3.
A
I don't
3.
know. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I think I'm at I think I looked at the news too early this morning, so I'm at and had too many cups of coffee, so I'm at like a 7. But it'll taper throughout the day, I hope.
I really am finding that timing my exposure to the news is becoming like this exquisite art. It's like, I don't know, it's like surfing. You have to know exactly when to hop on and hop off. So for me, it's 9 in the morning and it's still too early. Like,
Yeah.
I can't look at it. I looked at it late last night and it fucked my sleep up. So
I think it's like I think it's got to be like, maybe it's like 4 in the after. It's like dinner time, right? It's like 45 minutes while you're cooking dinner, and then you can talk about it over dinner. And then after that, it's like watch a good movie, read a book, go to bed.
yeah, well, I mean, this is like a thing that I think people think about a lot and something we struggle with on the podcast, which is like, it makes sense to be informed, but you can get addicted to it and it can become debilitating. And maybe you'd be a better citizen if you didn't follow the news so often. I'm speaking for myself personally, right? Like, because we're conditioned to think like, oh, good citizens and productive people know what's going on. And that's true up to a point. But if you get so lost in the weeds that it just becomes so depressing that you can't do anything, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you don't need to know what's going on all the time.
Yeah, not to a paralyzing degree. In
Right.
terms of things that people can do, though, I do say this at the top of all of these interviews, and I've neglected to say it so far, and that is that 438 million school lunches have been missed by children across the country due to closures because of the coronavirus. If people are watching this and they are curious how they can help, please go to nokidhungry.org, where you can find out ways that you can help these children get the meals that they need. I have found that it depends on how you consume news too. Just to get back to this, it's like reading a long article is so much different than just sort of getting the headlines. That like just getting the headlines, which I do all the time and did this morning, that is the thing that feels kind of debilitating and paralyzing in a way, because you're just no context getting like barraged.
Right. Yeah, and also like you can't survive on a diet of nothing but cake frosting, which is kind of what headlines and clickbait are. At some point, you should eat some of that good cakey richness of actual informed journalism.
Talk to me about election profit makers. Obviously, I think it started one way, but how has it changed in the midst of this?
So this is our second season. The podcast started in 2016 when a high school buddy of mine named John was spending all day on this website called Predict It, betting against Trump supporters. And he was like, you got to check it out. I'm making so much money. Predict It is a website where you basically bet on political futures, like who will be the Democratic nominee for president, or what will Trump's approval rating be on April 4th or something. It's a nonprofit that is allowed to do gambling because it's actually an academic study in the wisdom of crowds for political predictions. So that's how you can actually gamble with your actual money. So my friend was making all this money doing it and invited me to try it. And so we made a podcast during the 2016 season, John and me and our other friend Starlee, and we lost thousands of dollars on election night 2016. So the 2020 election was rolling around, and this company, Radio Point, asked if we wanted to bring it back, and we said, "Yeah, let's make our money back. Let's get our revenge." So that's how it started.
Have you been able to make your money back so far? Were all of you placing good bets on Biden?
I made money on Biden. I lost money on Warren. This is a big tension with us. Do you bet with your head or do you bet with your heart? The subtext of the podcast is we are pundits who will actually be held accountable if we get things wrong. There's so many people who face no consequences if they make errors of judgment or incorrect predictions. So the hook of our podcast is like, we're actually betting with our own money. So if we're wrong, we do pay the price, literally, we put our money where our mouth is. So that leads to these questions about, are we betting to make money, or are we betting because we want certain things to happen and we want to encourage those things to happen, So I liked Elizabeth Warren. I wanted her to be president. I bet money on her winning the nomination. I lost that money, obviously. But now I have all this money on whether Bernie Sanders is going to drop out. I think personally, he probably should drop out because I don't see what his plan is. But financially, I think he's going to be running for president next year. Like, I don't think he's ever going to drop out. I don't think he sees any reason to.
Because he's raised so much money.
What's that?
Oh, financially for you, not because like he's raised so much money he can stand to campaign till next year. Yeah, I got you.
So it's a mix of that kind of stuff. And then also, we look at the broader news. Obviously, everything is about the coronavirus now and whether that's going to affect. New York pushed its primary. That's a pretty big deal. What's going to happen with the nominating conventions? Are those going to get pushed? Is Trump going to do some kind of crazy special emergency decree where he just cancels the November elections and says we can't elect a new president until we're 5 years clear of the coronavirus or something, like Giuliani? Remember when Rudy Giuliani wanted to cancel the New York mayoral elections after 9/11? That kind of stuff. So it's just like current events, but filtered through this lens of we're betting actual money on what we think is going to happen and trying to justify our investments.
Was the sense that betting your actual money would be an actual punishment for getting something wrong versus pundits getting things wrong consistently and not being punished for it at all? Was that the impetus for it? Is that something that you found along the way?
Well, I used to be a political cartoonist, and I remember during the Iraq War when there were so many people who were so sure the Iraq War was a good idea and anybody who opposed it was an idiot. And then it turned out to be not such a great idea, but all those people still have their jobs basically, or have been promoted or something like that. So that was always something I thought about a lot. Like, there's a certain class of people who can be so wrong so often. It doesn't seem to matter. Like, a lot of jobs, like you fuck up enough or make enough mistakes, like you might get a demotion or you might lose your job. That doesn't seem to happen a lot in certain areas of journalism. So that was always kind of like a fascination of mine. So that's obviously one component of the podcast, which is, we can't be fired. It's just our little podcast, but we can lose our money. And I think that does kind of make you think things through a little more when you're deciding what the future holds. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. What do you think will happen? And it's so easy to just go on and be like, blah, 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 and just kind of go on autopilot, especially if there's a lot of conventional wisdom around this particular topic, right? But it's a little trickier if you're thinking about, like, well, wait a minute. How much do I believe that's going to happen? Do I believe that's going to happen $100 worth or $500 worth? Or when it came to Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump, it was like $4,000 worth? Like, how much do I think? That wasn't me. That was my friend John lost a lot of money on election night. So
how much did you bet on election night?
I can't remember election night. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember. All I remember is at one point turning off the TV and being like, no more.
What time did you go to bed on election night 2016?
Early, because it was like, I need to have one more night where this dude has not been elected president. So I'm going to bed now. I know what I'm going to wake up to, but let me just go to bed now.
I think it was between like 7:30 and 9 o'clock, where I was like,
it was probably the earliest I've been to bed since like I was in fifth grade.
I was like, where is the Xanax? I'm going down right now. This is done for me.
Right.
Yeah. In the last episode, you and your co-hosts were talking about the Richard Burr, Kelly Loeffler. Is it Kelly Loeffler? Is that her name? Scandal, and whether or not Richard Burr, sort of betting on whether or not Richard Burr is going to have to resign. Now, this was just released. The podcast was just released, what, yesterday or the day before?
I think we put it out on Tuesday.
Do you feel like this scandal has legs?
I don't know. So Richard Burr, for those of you who don't know, I grew up in North Carolina, and Richard Burr is one of the 2 Republican senators in North Carolina. So Richard Burr, like a lot of Republicans, was going around in public saying the coronavirus is not going to be a big deal. Everyone's overreacting. Don't scare everybody. But then he had a private meeting with like some of his donors and fancy people where he was basically like, oh, this could be like the pandemic of 1918. Like this could be really, really bad. And then he also turned around. What's that?
For your money. Like figure out where to put your money.
Yeah. So the next day after this behind closed doors briefing, he dumped like between like $600,000 and $1.5 million worth of stock. Like basically like 50% of his entire net worth he took out of markets that could be affected by the coronavirus, like travel and resort companies and stuff like that. And obviously that's not a great look for a public servant. I mean, it's very on brand for a certain type of Republican, but I think because the coronavirus is so scary to so many people, they were uniquely disgusted by this. The Department of Justice apparently is opening an investigation into it. One of the shareholders of one of the stocks that he dumped is going to file a suit against him. Now, Burr has said that he's not going to run for re-election when his term is up, which I think is in 2022. So I think part of him is just kind of like, what do I care? I'm not running again. But it kind of stuck in my craw a little bit. It just seems like, I don't know, you're telling your constituents not to worry about this thing, and then you're turning around and making financial decisions based on the assumption that it's going to be devastating. Like, maybe you should have told your constituents it was going to be devastating a couple weeks before you did. Like they could have used that information.
Well, then he wouldn't have been head of the market.
I know, right? Exactly. So these are the tough choices that our senators have to make, and we have to empathize with them. Do I look out for the well-being and the lives of my constituents, or do I make a little money before everybody else wakes up and realizes that we're headed for a global meltdown? I mean, it's like advanced ethics. Aristotle would really struggle with this question. What is the right thing to do?
What about Kelly? Is it Loeffler, right? Kelly Loeffler. She sold apparently like 18 or 19 million. It looks like at this point.
She's the one who's married to the president of the New York Securities Exchange.
Yeah.
She put out a video didn't she put out like an inspirational video about how to feel connected during social distancing or something?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, man. At some point, it's like, what is there to say? I don't know. Like, she's a monster. Like,
well, I wonder. I was thinking about that when I was like before this interview, because I knew you when we were doing the Get Your War On animated series for 23/6, and I remember during the lead up and during the Iraq War, Get Your War On just as a comic being this sort of like inspirational force for so many of us, because it felt like you were a pariah if you were against the war. Lots of people don't remember that, but like you really were a pariah from like 2002 to 2006 if you were, or maybe 5 if you were like against the war. You were considered anti-troop basically, and it was incredible when anybody had a voice. But we're at this point where things are seemingly like, how long do we have to do this? Do you feel that?
What do you mean? Do what?
How long do we have to be a voice of seeming reason in the midst of these people profiteering off of the pain and suffering of all of us?
You have to do it forever. Like it's I think it's the human condition. Some people act really, really bad and are amoral, and it sucks, but I think you just do it until you die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can and when I say do it, I mean you just have to, like, it sounds like a bumper sticker, but you just like have to read the newspaper and stay involved and figure out what actions you want to take to make the world more like the world you want to live in, right? Um, but yeah, it stinks. And I think sometimes, like what the moment that we're in right now, I think the Trump presidency, and then this especially the coronavirus, it just feels so extreme and unusual and unprecedented in some ways, but also just like the same old song and dance in other depressing ways. So it's this weird mix of feeling really new and alien and also like really deep and old. Like all the race stuff, you know, just
Yes.
feels so old, right? And it kind of makes it's kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes, you know? There's some people who say, we've never had anyone like Trump. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to the country, you know? And I would kind of be like, I don't know, Bush, you know, up until recently, at least, Bush certainly had more blood on his hands. Like more people
Yeah.
died because of Bush than Trump. And then on the other hand, people are like, Trump is the same old Republican. This stuff never changes. He's no different from anyone else. And it's like, I don't know, man. I think Trump's a little different than other Republicans. Like he's drafting on some of those waves that other Republicans have made, but it's like the kind of like debased quality of him. It feels like it's a little bit different. I mean, it's, you know, so on the one hand, it's not totally extreme and unprecedented in human history. It's as old as the first autocrat, whoever like bonked someone else over the head with a club in a cave or whatever, caveman government autocrat.
Right.
And on the other hand, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't suck. It sucks. Like,
yeah,
it's
of
bad.
course.
Yeah.
It's more transparent and naked, which makes it all the more vulgar and sort of hard to withstand at times. I mean, at the very least, the profiteering with the Bush administration was attempting to be behind the curtain, whereas with the Trump administration, they're literally getting up in front of. I mean, Kushner was literally in a press conference yesterday, being like, "The states don't deserve this stuff. This is the federal stockpile."
So that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, that feels new.
Yes.
The president's son-in-law is basically put in charge of like the biggest health catastrophe in our lifetimes. And the thing he's talking about at the podium is like, stop asking us for all this stuff to save your lives. This is our stuff. Go get your own stuff. Like that feels new. Yeah.
Very on brand for a privileged little shit though, to be like, this is mine.
Yeah. I mean, and also for a sketchy landlord who's just like, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing where it's like, on the one hand, I feel like I should watch this to be informed. On the other hand, if I watch this, am I going to be able to function for the rest of the day? Like, you know, but I do think that is very deliberate strategy on some level, which is to so dispirit and discourage the opposition, you know, that they just give up and don't leave their bed. And so, yeah, you have to manage your time. You have to manage your spirit. You have to stay connected to things outside the world of politics, you know, like even though I do think the world is fundamentally like a political place, like I think about most of the world in terms of politics, like you have to do other stuff or you're just going to see Jared Kushner's little face and you hear his little whiny voice every time you try to disconnect. You know, you have to make space in your life for other stuff, especially now because the stress of politics can compromise your immune system and make you more susceptible to a fatal disease that the federal government doesn't give a shit about fixing or not, you know? So it's kind of like, yeah. How am I doing? I guess my long answer is it's complicated.
I think we just went through for 20 minutes how we're both doing.
So what's your second question? Oh no,
well,
how are you doing?
Same. Exact same. What are you doing to take your mind off of politics when you can and calm yourself down a little bit?
Figuring out 100 ways to eat the same can of beans. Cleaning my apartment, within an inch of its life. You know, I feel like I've like mopped and sprayed down the floorboards, like down to the studs. Playing music. One thing I'll say that's good is, have you ever read any books by P.G. Wodehouse, the British author?
No.
He wrote this famous series of books called Jeeves and Wooster. Jeeves was a butler, and Wooster was his like young layabout boss, and they're like the funniest books ever written. They're so effervescent. They're written in the early 20th century. They're so effervescent and non-political and silly, and the language is so fun. It's the stuff I started reading Wodehouse. I mean, I read him for years and years, but after Trump got elected, it was like, it's Wodehouse time. Like every night before I go to bed, I'm going to read one of these short stories, right?
Yeah.
And so when the coronavirus really started getting fucked up, I was like, it's time to get back into the Wodehouse. So every night before I go to bed, I make sure that the last thing I see is not my Twitter feed.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just like a book, you know?
Yeah.
So
calm yourself. Keep the phone out of the bedroom.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
If possible.
Where in the upcoming episodes of Profit Makers, what are you guys going to be betting on?
Well, I think a big thing, I mean, the bet that I made last week is I bet against Joe Biden being the nominee. I don't know why, but it just feels like, I guess part of that is wishful thinking, and part of that is just like looking at him and being like, I don't think he's up for this, you know?
Is it those interviews where he's kind of like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah, just like, dude, like this is time. This is when we would expect you to bring your A game. And I mean, so I don't know. So I have money on whether Joe Biden will be the nominee. We still have bets out about if Bernie will ever drop out, and whether delaying these primaries is going to encourage him to just stay in, because why not be a part of this conversation? And I have all my Richard Burr bets, hoping that Richard Burr will not be in office by the end of April. I know that's a long shot, but I'm calling my senators and trying to explain to them that they need to get rid of him because he's ethically compromised, and because I bet money to get rid of him because he's ethically compromised. So it's really a twofer. And then a lot of the bets are just based on whatever's happening, as we start recording. These markets open up, right? A market about a specific news event. And then we just talk through the news through the lens of, making these bets, trying to make money.
Who would you bet on to replace Biden right now as the nominee?
Well, that's the thing. I couldn't make that bet. I have no idea. I just have this feeling that it's not going to happen. And I don't know. I mean, is it that he's going to die? I don't think he's going to die. Is it that he's just going to say, he's going to wake up one morning and be like, wait a minute, this isn't fun anymore, and then he's going to quit? I don't know, man. I had to, because the podcast is all about like using our money and making these bets to reflect something about how we're feeling about the news or what we're thinking about the news. It was like, I need to put some money on this guy not being the nominee, because this just does not feel like it's going to happen. I don't know.
Well, on top of that, Trump is about to be president during a unprecedented plague that's going to kill upwards of, they're saying maybe even more than 240,000 people. Like, experts have no idea where they got that model even from at this point. So say it's at best 100,000 people dead by June. Would you still bet on Biden if Biden stayed the nominee?
You're asking me, who do I think will win in an election between Trump and Biden?
Yeah, post-coronavirus.
I mean, I think Biden, because the polling in the swing states show Biden leading, and I've learned not to, but there's so many I mean, do people still say X factors? Yeah, there's so many X factors right now. I don't know. Like, what if Trump gets the coronavirus? What if he can't stand being cooped up and he needs a crowd, and so he goes against the advice of his consultants and he goes and holds a rally in Florida and is just running around like licking lampposts and toilet bowls and stuff, like going crazy. I mean, he wouldn't do that because he's a germaphobe, but
just hugging and kissing flags.
Yeah, dirty flag, filthy flags that some leftist opposition people have sprayed with coronavirus or something. Because he can't help but hug a flag. The sensual lines and the supple supple figure of an American flag. There's nothing more erotic to a true lifelong patriot like Donald Trump. Can't keep his hands off it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess if it was Trump Biden and we were having a normal election, like in November, the way God intended, I'd probably bet on Biden just because of the swing state polling. You know?
And coming from 2016, we've learned to bet on the polling.
Well, this has been a nice talk, Ricky. Appreciate the attitude. I mean, I don't know what else I have to go on.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just playing.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I probably earned that.
I mean, I have no idea. I would. I'm not. I don't bet. I would probably bet against Biden. He just is coming across fairly weak in every appearance, and Trump at the very least is coming across as aggressive and strong. I mean, this is all shallow surface. If you read beneath that, there's absolutely nothing beneath what Trump is saying. But he's doing these appearances every day to show strength of some kind.
Yeah, and to appear presidential, and to he can have one day where he's not basically farting into his elbow, and the New York Times will say he seems newly sober. The consequences of this virus seem to have matured the former irascible president, and now we see a character the likes of which recalls Jack London and Teddy Roosevelt. Could this be a new era of sober assessment and rational thought from President Trump? And then the next day he's back to
cut to the morning where he's just farting into Twitter again.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I mean, appearances are important. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So PG Woodhouse, right? That's what we
my
should
cultural
say.
recommendation. PG Woodhouse, the Jeeves and Worcester books. Yep. That might help.
And every Tuesday is the Election Profit Makers podcast released?
Election Profit Makers podcast drops on Tuesday unless something crazy happens, so we change our record to some other event, But for now, it's Tuesdays. Yep.
And so next Tuesday, before I let you go, next Tuesday, what do you think you guys are going to? What looks like you're going to be talking about right now? What does it look like you're going to be talking about? Obviously, that could change.
I'm waiting for some type of Jared Kushner market to open up because I would love to win or lose some money based on Jared Kushner in particular. But other than that, it's Democratic primary polling, it's Trump approval ratings. You can even bet on how many times Trump tweets over the course of a week. Like, you can really get into some funky, weird markets. And when the debates start, you can bet on whether certain words are said during the debate. Like in 2016, there was a market, will Donald Trump utter the phrase crooked Hillary during the so-and-so debate? And you could actually bet on that. So
Did you bet on that?
I can't remember if I bet on that one. I think I bet on Benghazi, whether he would mention Benghazi. So as the election continues and as the year progresses, the market is constantly changing, and they're constantly adding new contracts, new things that you can bet on based on what's going on. So like when Richard Burr got caught in that insider trading thing, boop, up popped a new market. Will Richard Burr still be a president? Or will Richard Burr still be a senator on May 1st? So it's always changing. It's always dynamic. So we usually...
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we usually look at it a couple days before we start recording and look at the new markets and be like, oh, I have something to say about that, or oh, that seems like easy money, or more often than not, like, I don't know, I guess I'll bet 50 cents on that.
Right. And you're betting that that Burr will be gone by May 1st.
Yes, I know it's a long shot, but it's wishful thinking, and it motivates me to call my senators every day to tell them to get this asshole out of the Senate. Because now I have skin in the game, So now I have two reasons to do it. One, because it's the right thing to do, and two, because if he does leave the Senate, I'll make a little money.
Yeah, what if we convinced everybody to do this so they had skin in the game and we're calling their senators all the time? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know.
If a bunch of people on the internet were calling their senators based solely on their financial interests and predict it, I mean, in a weird way, it would be a democratizing influence, because usually the only people who get FaceTime with their senators for their financial reasons are like people on corporate boards or the Chamber of Commerce. So maybe if this is what it took to get people more involved in lobbying their legislators, then I am a hero. Thank you for suggesting that.
On that note, David, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's really good to see you, man. Actually, I was stoked when I realized this was you, because obviously I've just been wondering about everybody in New York, but you look great as
Yeah,
always. Looks like you
you do
have
too.
an iron in your home. Your shirt looks terrific. I'm happy to see that.
It's funny that you said that because I actually had to change my shirt this morning while I was on camera because it was the other one was too wrinkly. My 9 Inch Nails shirt was too wrinkly for the
There
feed.
you go. Well, so
Yeah.
whoever told you to change that shirt, proof is in the pudding. I just noticed how great that shirt looks. But it is really good to see you, man. I hope you take care.
Good to see you. Yeah,
Yeah.
please stay healthy, stay safe, and enjoy PG Woodhouse, please.
Thank you. Same to you, Ricky.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, David. Thank you.